introduce our speakers. Okay. Natalie Hadley and Greg Rogers. As Vice President of Outlook Business Solutions, Natalie helps companies understand what's holding back their growth and then matches those needs with a team of more than 25 skilled professionals who happen to be visually impaired. The company specializes in marketing, digital accessibility, and customer care, regularly adding new team members with talents and skills in unexpected areas. Natalie has a master's in communications from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Go Mavericks. Greg recently joined the Outlook Business Solutions team as the accessibility testing manager. He specializes in the strategic planning, management, and execution of projects to assist businesses in making their websites and applications accessible to disabled people. In his new role, Greg will oversee website audits to ensure ADA and WCAG compliance, work with clients to implement accessibility improvements, and recruit additional accessibility testers for the team. With their many successes, they are excited to talk with you today. So folks, Natalie and Greg, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stancia. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to be here today and happy to be representing the disability community in this aspect of the DEI conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Greg has a demonstration. We'll be doing a demonstration of screen reader software. So we want to make sure that we have time for that. So is everybody seeing my opening slide? Thank you, Liz. All right, so we love this title, Is Your Website as Accessible as Your Restrooms? The ADA has been around now for 31 years. And I think that when it came out 31 years ago, and I'm actually old enough to remember when it came out 31 years ago, restrooms were one of the big areas that companies were looking at. And it was a lot about brick and mortar, making sure that restroom doors and stalls were accessible for people in wheelchairs. We've come a long way since then with accessibility, but digital accessibility is one of the newer frontiers in the accessibility conversation. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is the digital environment. So Stancia gave us a great introduction. What we're going to cover today is, what does accessibility mean? We're going to look at the market risks to businesses that are not accessible and the legal risks for not being accessible. Greg's going to do a demonstration of screen reader software, and then we'll re-summarize Greg's content in some quick tips for better accessibility, and briefly touch on how to add accessibility expertise to your development team. And again, please post your questions in the chat as we go, and we will answer those at the end. Quick word about Outlook Business Solutions. We are a business growth agency based in Omaha. We specialize, as Stancia mentioned, in marketing, customer care, and digital accessibility. And she mentioned our network of professionals all over the country. And the commonality is that most of them are visually impaired. We are part of the Outlook Collaborative family of companies that are all focused on providing earning and enrichment opportunities to people with vision impairment. So what is digital accessibility? Digital accessibility really means that all users have access to the same information, regardless of any disability they may have or the technology they may use to access that information. The United Nations has actually recognized access to information and communications technologies, including access to the web, as a basic human right. What information needs to be accessible? Basically, all of it. So your forms, pictures on your websites, videos that you may have on your websites or use maybe in your employee orientations, trainings, your meetings. So today we're using a technology called Scribe for Meetings. You may have seen that link posted in the chat. Scribe for Meetings allows a print disabled attendee of your meeting to download an accessible format of the slide presentation. And they can choose from one of 8 different formats. So we include that with all of the meetings that we do online, so that our print disabled attendees can access the information. So really there's a whole host of information formats that may not be accessible without some additional effort. So the DEI conference, the unconference is focused, of course, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But unlike gender, race, or sexual identity or orientation, disability is the only minority group that any of us could join at any time, and it would completely change our lives overnight. So it's an area that, that is important to the entire DEI conversation, because 1 in 4 Americans, so 61 million total American adults, live with a disability, 26% of the adult population. And it may be surprising that fewer than 15% of those individuals were born with a disability. So 85% of people with disabilities acquire that disability later in life, usually through disease or injury. The top causes of disability are arthritis, head, neck and spine injuries, and then heart disease. So that means, as we're looking at the future of the workforce, that 1 in 4 of today's 20-year-olds will become disabled before they even reach retirement age. So disability is not a born with it problem. Disability is not a old people problem. We're going to talk a little bit about disability and employment. Employment opportunities for people with disabilities can be limited when they can't access basic workplace tools to perform their job duties. And that can even start as early as the careers page of a company's website or its job postings, making sure that those are accessible. As a result, the unemployment rate of people with disabilities is about double the overall unemployment rate. Last time I checked, the overall US unemployment rate was somewhere just above 5%, but the unemployment rate of people with disabilities was about 12.6%, if I'm remembering correctly. And then the disability rate for people with vision impairment, the unemployment rate, I'm sorry, for people with vision impairment is even higher, between 17 and 19%. But disability inclusion is good for business. Companies actively looking to include people with disabilities in their organizations had 28% higher revenue, double the net income, and 30% higher economic profit margins than those who don't prioritize disability hiring. And those numbers are from Accenture. And also from Accenture, disability inclusion is good for the national economy. The US economy could get a boost of up to $25 billion if more people with disabilities were to join the labor force. I believe that $25 billion was based on just 1% additional employment of people with disabilities. So it's exponential. If we can get 25 billion out of 1%, that's 50 billion with 2% and on up. The cost for employers to accommodate a disabled employee, that is often a perceived obstacle to hiring people with disabilities, is that accommodations are going to be costly. But typically 50% of accommodations don't cost the company anything at all. 39% of accommodations are just a one-time cost, and the average cost of the one-time accommodation is just $500. So there's this misperception that, for example, if a company were to hire someone with vision impairment, that the company would then have to invest heavily in adaptive technology for that person with vision impairment. But as Greg's going to show later with the demonstration, for somebody, for example, who is totally blind and uses screen reader software, they use that software every day in their life. So the business would not have to make an additional accommodation for screen reader software because it's something that the employee is already using. Disability, as I said, is really the missing piece of the DEI conversation. So the United Nations did a study, and of all the articles being written about diversity right now, over the past few years, only 3% reference disability as part of that conversation. And that's an increase of just 1% over the past 5 years. So when we look at the increased conversation and public discourse on the broad topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, disability is really being left out of that conversation. So why is accessibility and disability awareness important to businesses? So one of the first things we look at is market share. Is a company reaching all of its potential customers? And WebAIM does a study every year, and they analyze 1,000 website homepages and publish the results on how many of those have errors according to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. So if you hear the word WCAG or WCAG, that's what that stands for. So WebAIM found that 98% of websites have detectable accessibility failures. And when accessibility fails for someone trying to access a website, it's just a big sign that they are not welcome on that website. They're not welcome as customers of that business. But it's a big market opportunity. So 16% of working age Americans have a disability. So again, we're not counting children, we're not counting retirees. We're talking about people that are out in the workforce earning an income. And the discretionary income for this population is $21 billion. Discretionary income being the money that's left over after you pay taxes and pay for your necessities like rent or your mortgage, food, clothing, those kind of things. So discretionary income is that money that you get to choose what you do with it. And that part alone is a $21 billion market for people with disabilities. And that market is probably going to get bigger as our baby boomers are moving into retirement. So baby boomers in their 50s and 60s are actually in worse health than earlier generations at the same age, their parents and their grandparents. Due to chronic disease like heart disease, diabetes, conditions of that nature, and disability. But baby boomers are the biggest spenders in the market right now. So the highest spending is that age bracket between 55 and 59. So if your business is not accessible, you could be missing out on this high spending market segment. And again, when someone with a disability is trying to navigate a website and having difficulty, 71% of those are not going to call customer service and ask for help. They are going to simply leave the website and go find a vendor, go find a business that they can do business with online that is accessible. So again, most businesses are not taking advantage of this huge market of people with disabilities. Societal shifts are pointing, like our aging population, are pointing toward growing numbers and greater inclusion of people with disabilities. And the market potential is even larger when you think about the friends, family members, caregivers, colleagues, and all of the people who are connected to consumers with disabilities. So now we're going to talk about legal risk. Things as simple as ordering a pizza. So in 2016, a gentleman who is visually impaired was attempting to use screen reader to access the app and website to order pizza from Domino's. And he found that the Domino's website and the app were not accessible with screen reader. So he called his local Domino's to place his order and attempted to use a coupon that was tied specifically to using the app or ordering online. And Domino's refused to honor the coupon because he was ordering by phone and not one of those other channels. So this individual filed a complaint under Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and Domino's chose to fight the complaint. So this started its way through the court system, and in 2019 reached the United States Supreme Court for consideration to be heard by SCOTUS. That was denied. It's called certiorari. So the Supreme Court said, we're not going to hear this case. It's going to go back down to the lower level courts. Domino's is still fighting this complaint under the ADA. They have not conceded that, yes, somebody with a disability should be able to access a website or use a mobile app to do something as simple as order pizza. This is what's really staggering about the Domino's case. By most estimates, the cost for Domino's to have made the changes so the website or the app would be accessible range from $32,000 up to, I think the highest I've seen is an estimate of $40,000. And yet the estimated legal fees Domino's has paid fighting this in the courts reached a $6 million level in 2019 at that Supreme Court level. So that was in October of 2019 that the Supreme Court denied certiorari. So it's been 2 years. So that 6 million is even higher because those that plaque for the attorneys is still going for Domino's, and they're still paying legal fees to fight this in court. What's not shown here and is of also of consideration is the reputational damage that Domino's has done within the disability community. And again, within those larger, the larger centers of influence around the disability community. So family members, disability advocates, caregivers, anybody who is aware of the importance of accessibility is aware of the Domino's case, and I'm pretty sure not purchasing Domino's pizza. The number of accessibility cases, digital accessibility cases filed under the ADA is increasing. We saw a 23% increase in 2020 over 2019, mostly because that Supreme Court, the Supreme Court question had been resolved, and then the lawsuits started back up. We're on pace to have almost 4,200 cases by the end of this year. This only includes cases filed at the federal level under the Americans with Disabilities Act and in the state of California under the UNRRA Act, which is very similar to the ADA. This does not include any complaints filed at the state level or at lower court levels. So when we talk about assistive and adaptive technology, it really isn't just for people with disabilities. Assistive technology is any item, system, or product that is used to improve a person's functional capabilities. Adaptive tech is actually a subset of assistive tech. It refers to something specifically designed for people with disabilities. But when we stop and think about some modern conveniences, it's interesting to note those that were truly designed for people with disabilities. So text messaging, for example, was actually designed as a way for people with hearing impairments to use mobile devices like mobile phones. So they could not hear over the mobile device, but once text was created, people with hearing impairment could use their mobile phone to text instead of using audio and voice. Another technology that came out of accessibility and disability is speech command. So it's interesting that when we think about speech command today, we think very quickly about Siri and Alexa, those two names. But it's interesting to note that Alexa came on the market, Echo and Alexa came on the market in 2014. Google first introduced voice search as a novelty feature in 2012, and Apple introduced Siri in 2011. But the first voice speech recognition software was Dragon Naturally Speaking, which was introduced in 1997, 14 years before Siri. And Dragon Naturally Speaking was introduced as a way for people with vision or mobility impairments to interact with their computers. So people who could not use a mouse or may not be able to use a keyboard could interact with their computers using voice. So who needs speech recognition? Obviously, a person with a permanent disability. So here we have a photograph of an amputee, and she is using a fork on her, what she has of her right arm. But a person with a permanent disability such as this may not be able to use a mouse or a keyboard. So speech command allows them to interact with technology without using those tools. Or we may have a person with a temporary disability. So for example, a person who has an accident or has an injury and is temporarily unable to use their hands, so they aren't able to use a keyboard or a mouse. Speech offers a great way to interact, again, with their technology. Or it could be just a situational inability. So here we have a father with his baby, and we can imagine perhaps a situation where the baby is in distress. Maybe they've swallowed something or have had an injury where the father may not be able to use his hands to dial 911 or dial poison control. And so instead he can use speech to use his mobile device to make that call and to relay the information he needs to take care of his child. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to Greg so that he can do the screen reader demonstration.
And there we go. I was having trouble sharing for a couple minutes. So I'm going to demo just a few user experiences for you using screen reading software. Natalie had talked about the cost of accommodations being pretty reasonable. The screen reader that I'm using is called Non-Visual Desktop Access. And I think I might have messed up my sharing real quick. I'm going to redo this real quick. But this is a free screen reader that any company can download for their employees. So much.
Meeting controls window. Welcome to City.
And can everyone hear the screen reader?
Press F11 to exit full screen alert.
Yes, Greg, you have a pop-up on your screen about the meeting being recorded in Zoom. Are you able to close that?
Meeting controls row 1, Zoom row 1, column 3. Zoom, you cannot start screen. Close button. Welcome to City Lights. Meeting controls row. This meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being. The account owner and host. Account owner. Got it button. Welcome to City.
Hopefully that's gone now.
Yep, all gone. You're good to go.
Good. So the way this will work, and I do want to apologize, there's going to be some Zoom chatters.
Star Liz Kerrigan.
Do things in the chat, so you might hear some status messages from Zoom. I'll try to quiet that as soon as I can. But I'm going to show you an inaccessible or poor functioning experience, followed by something that functions really well. And so we've got 3 demos that we're going to demonstrate today. We could do more, but just because of time, we won't be able to get to more of those. We'll start out with inaccessible images or graphics that we see on the screen. So as someone that uses a screen reader, I can actually navigate by graphics, and let's see what we have here. And I'll talk through this just briefly.
1. Meeting controls. Welcome to City Light. Welcome to City Lights. Link skip. Inaccessible home. Red dot with a white letter C that symbolizes a moon crescent as well as the sun. This logo is followed by a black banner.
So that's a very long description, and it's not really telling me anything that I need to know. That's part of this graphic. And I feel sort of overwhelmed by trying to listen to this particular description. Then there's others that have no description. We'll go through some of those.
To get missing image descriptions, open the context menu.
Like that
Unlabeled
one.
graphic. NAV home unlabeled graphic link.
And then these next 4 have, you actually heard it said NAV graphic home link. So it's actually giving me HTML code that I don't need to hear, which can cause confusion. If it just said home or
NAV news unlabeled graphic link.
News, that would tell me everything I need to hear. So it's too verbose and telling me things that as a typical user, I just don't need to hear.
NAV serve bullet graphic.
And then more
bullet graphic.
More graphics that don't have descriptions. And then this final one here is a phone number with no formatting. So I have no idea what that number actually means. Let's walk through that just a little bit.
1,234 56,789 graph.
So now that you've seen some inaccessible graphics and what that looks like, is everyone able to understand the screen reader, or should I slow it down a little bit more?
We can understand.
Yes.
Okay. So now let's go to some graphics that are just a little bit better. Let's just walk through this here.
City Lights, your access to the city. Graphic.
That's really nice. This just tells me that this is the City Lights logo, and then the caption is your access to the city. That's short, succinct, and tells me everything I need to know.
Sunny spells graphic.
That's a flower. Sunny spells flower.
Graphic city lights. Graphic sunny spells. Free penguins playing on stage graphic.
And here's a description of the band. So the Free Penguins logo, and then it tells me that it's playing on stage.
Anemone snowdrop flower blooming graphic.
And here's another flower here on the screen.
No next graphic.
And then that's an example of some accessible graphics.
Welcome to
Now I want to talk just briefly about reading experiences. So there's a misperception that on a website, a screen reader will just read from tip to tail, and that's all it can do. But in fact, I can scan by various controls like headings and links and buttons and various elements on the page. But as you'll see in this demo, I won't have any useful headings, and some of the links will be while they have labels, they're very ambiguous, so I don't know their purpose. Let's demonstrate that now.
inaccessible home page before and after demonstration. No next heading.
So there's no next heading, so the page is not divided up in a way that I can easily read this. So I have a backup plan, and it's called the
From
next.
Amber Markham, she, her, ConAgra brand.
It's called the next block of text command. And so, and if this is coded, then this can be a good backup plan, but you'll see that it'll actually skip some texts.
List with 6 items, current location home. To get missing image descriptions, blank, visited link unlabeled graphic, blank, image.
So here's an unlabeled image.
Link heat, the latest news. City Lights is the new port. Welcome to City, blank.
So it skips these 3 lines of content starting with
Welcome to City Lights.
Welcome to City Lights. And it just puts me at an unlabeled image. So I miss a lot of that next block, the text, because of the poor coding. So even the next block of text command isn't helping here. And I'll show you just one more example of that.
Image. Mayor, these kinds of crimes need more creative, effective punishments. For example, we could.
You can see that the highlighter is at mayor, but you can see because of the way that the code is implemented, I've missed.
Link was hot. After 3 years of effort, image. After 3 years of effort, city scientists now agree that the primary cause of the 2003 heat wave was hot air from our.
I missed that initial headline. So if I want to take another different type of scan of the page, or I just know what I'm looking for, I can open a links list, which brings up all types of links on the page. And these links actually do have tables or have labels, but as you can see, it will be they're not very clear and don't give me context of what that looks like.
Element.
Let's look for things like.
See, click here 24 of 55 level 0.
Here. Or
Sophie Wojcik, she/her, has left the meeting.
Or
L, liability 50, L, lack of brain, L, liability 50.
How about this one?
R, red dot with a R, read more, visited
Read more.
20, R, read more, visited.
So these are pretty common link labels that you'll see. You see this a lot in the marketing profession where they want to keep things consistent, but they have a similar ambiguous label like click here, read more, learn more. But when you're reading through that, it doesn't tell the user where that link is going, and it can be very ambiguous. Let's go to a better example with reading experiences that make a little bit better sense.
Welcome to City. Link.
So as you can see on this one, I'll start browsing by headings.
Accessible home page before and after demonstration. Welcome to City Lights heading level 1.
So this is nice because it has a better heading structure. The first heading right here tells me what this page is for.
Stephanie Kaiser Metropolitan Utilities District heat wave link to temperatures link heading level 2. Man gets 9 months in violin case link heading level 2. Aaron, lack of brains hinders research link heading level 2.
And so as you can see, I'm able to just browse by each news article by using the heading structure, which makes things much more efficient for me, and it tells me where I'm at. I'm not lost on the page. And let's just take a quick look at the links list here.
Elements list dialog, tree view, skip to accessible demo page, W3C logo 2, web accessibility, overview 4 of 55 level, inaccessible home page report 6, accessible home page show annotations 8 of 55 level 0.
So we can see these labels are very clear and they tell me exactly what I need to know.
R, L, lack of brain hinders, L, liability.
We don't see any read more, learn more, or ambiguous labels that can be confusing.
Welcome.
I want to show you a couple different forms. So forms are really important for folks
Jairus Sturdivant Wilson.
as they interact with the website. And I'll show you the first form, which is inaccessible, even though it
City
has
Lights Survey accessible
even though it has
Office supply.
Labels above the
Banner.
fields. The problem is that they're not associated. So as a screen reader user, I like to just be able to tab through the form and type or interact with the arrow keys depending on the types of fields. Let's just demonstrate this and see what happens.
Main landmark form edit. Main landmark, form landmark, edit blank, edit Phoenix, she/her, edit has autocomplete blank, edit has autocomplete blank, combo box collapsed.
So the problem is on this particular form,
Add me to the mailing list check.
It has very few labels that are accessible when I try to tab through it. So in order for me to fill out this particular form, I'm going to have to take probably double or triple the time and have to use arrow keys just to try to navigate through that form. Let's go to a little bit better form and show you the difference when
City
I use
Light
tabbing.
Link. Form explore site by topic, combo, go button. Form favorite park grouping none radio button not checked.
So this is nice because as I go into the first field, it first asks me the question, and then it puts me at the radio button, the first one and it tells me the status of whether it's not checked or checked. So I can
radio button not checked Central Park.
So I'll just check Central Park
Checked.
here, and then I'll just start tabbing through this and we'll see what we find.
Greenest city grouping, cities of the world combo box, select a city.
So
Aaron Galley has left the
what's
meeting.
the greenest city of the world? Let's just, I'm going to choose Washington. So the nice thing about this combo box is I can just use first letter navigation.
Washington D.C.
And
United
get to
States.
it quickly.
W. Free newsletter, optional, grouping, MR. Radio button not checked title 1 of 2.
So this
Ralph
is,
Kellogg Lutheran Family Services.
so this can be helpful because I'm able to see specifically, it asks the
Caleb
question
Knudsen has
again
joined
and the grouping labels are done. And if I were to go back to the previous
Matthews
question, it would continue to save my answers, which is really helpful.
Name, edit has autocomplete blank. Email address, edit has autocomplete blank. Retype email, edit has autocomplete blank. Submit button.
So the labels are clear and distinctual, and they tell me exactly what I need to know. So I could fill out this form in probably, 2 minutes, as opposed to the other form. It might take me, 6 to 10 minutes. So having accessible properties can really save people time, energy, and frustration. Obviously, there's a lot more we could show today, but due to time constraints, this will be it for today's demo. I'd like to pass it over to Natalie, and she'll cover some additional topics. Thanks for attending, and again, we'll have some time to answer questions afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. All right, I am going to share again here. Maybe, there we go. All right, so we're just gonna go through some of the best practices that Greg mentioned. So we covered alt text. 31% of homepage images are missing the alt text. And context makes a difference in alt text. So we have two images here that both could be described as student using microscope. But depending on the context, whether maybe we're trying to encourage young girls who are people of color to go into STEM careers, or maybe we are a university site talking about the latest, greatest equipment we have, we might want to describe very specifically African-American 8-year-old girl using a microscope or doctoral student using microscope. So context can be very important on your alt text. Greg covered forms. 55% of form inputs are not properly labeled. So the problem again, screen reader does read top to bottom, left to right. So in that top example, it would read editable field blank, editable field blank, editable field blank, first name, last name, email. So it's important that those link labels be positioned correctly and that in the code, the field itself is labeled correctly. Header structure, Greg showed how important that is for a person who's using screen reader to be able to skim through the page. 32% of pages had skipped headings and 12% had no headings at all. So headings aren't just to look pretty, they actually are a structural element that assists in navigation for the page. Ambiguous links, again, as a marketer, you know, I used to love having all my link labels be consistent on a page. So they all said learn more, or they all said click here, or they all said read more. But the problem is, as Greg demonstrated with screen reader, if he wants to navigate a page and have it read just the links on the page, having them all labeled the same doesn't provide him the context he needs to be able to navigate the page. So 24% of the pages that WebAIM reviewed in its annual study had ambiguous links. We didn't touch too much on hearing impairment today in our demo, but 41% of videos are incomprehensible without sound or captions. So it's important that videos have a closed captioning option, or there is a transcript available, or both. Again, we didn't touch on it with screen reader, but when we have people with low vision versus totally blind, color contrast is hugely important. So in this example, we've got a very light colored kind of cream background with gray text over the top, which would not meet the WCAG standards. So there 86% of homepages fail on text contrast. So it's important that designers look at that color palette and make sure that they're using a color palette that will help people with disabilities with the content. So again, just the basics: compatibility with screen reader, voice command and magnification software, images labeled, form input fields labeled, videos with closed captioning, headers labeled and used correctly, high color contrast for low vision users, and buttons and links are some of the top areas that we see accessibility errors. And most of these are easy fixes for the person using the content management system for the website. So accessibility is an outcome, inclusive design is the process. And if we don't include people with disabilities in the process, we can't really call it inclusive design. So having that, how do you add that perspective, that disability perspective? Because maybe there's nobody in your company who has a particular disability. And that's why Outlook Business Solutions offers ally support. So just a quick plug here. Ally support lets you add digital accessibility expertise without adding full-time staff. So you can outsource those questions and needs to us. We become kind of your accessibility help desk. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can chat me or contact us. So really quick summary before we go to questions. Accessibility makes your market bigger. So when your website is accessible, you then can invite people with disabilities in to become your customers, to become your employees, to become your advocates. It makes your legal risk smaller. So even progressive efforts towards accessibility and towards complying with the WCAG standards reduces your accessibility, your legal risk, even if you haven't reached full compliance with WCAG. The courts view it very positively when companies are actively working to make the website accessible, even if they don't have it perfect just yet. So with that, I will stop sharing and we can open it up to questions.
Absolutely. We've got some good ones here. We're going to start with Justin's question, which is, do the parties that submit a claim, and this relates to the Domino's case and everything, do the parties that submit a claim through the ADA have any financial burden from these cases?
So I'll take that two ways on financial burden. So if the question is, does the plaintiff have to show an actual financial burden to be able to file a claim? No. They don't have to show that the lack of accessibility caused them a financial hardship. Under the ADA, it's about equal access. So it's not showing that there were damages per se. They do have to, however, if there's a class action, they have to have participated in the action for the class. If a website's not accessible and there's a group of plaintiffs who bring action, a plaintiff can't bring action if they never used the website or they never intended, or they're not a potential customer of that business. So Ken Nakata, if you're really interested in the legal side, go to convergeaccessibility.com. And Ken Nakata is one of the owners and founders of Converge. He actually was with the Department of Justice during the drafting of the ADA and also the federal government's Section 508 compliance guidelines that dictate that federal websites have to be accessible. On the other side of that, do they have a burden in terms of like legal fees? Yes. I mean, you know, if a person files an ADA complaint and they want to be represented by counsel and move that through the court system, then depending on their arrangement with the attorney, there may be a financial burden for them to basically bring that action and fight that case in the court system.
Fantastic. Hopefully that got your questions answered there, Justin. Good. The next question is, what was the name of the screen reader software, please?
So there are, go ahead, Greg.
So the one we demoed today was non-visual desktop access, and that was the free one that I like to generally test with by default, just because everyone has access to it, and so your typical user can. That's, you know, and then there's also a commercial screen reader called JAWS for Windows that's available. So there's a couple different main Windows screen readers. And then Windows, Microsoft is building their own narrator that's built in. And then the mobile applications actually, or the mobile devices both have screen readers as well. So those are just a couple screen readers that are pretty popular in the space.
Great. And Liz has been dropping those links in the chat. So thank you, Liz. What about career sites? What makes one great in terms of accessibility?
So I think go ahead, Greg.
Sorry about that. So a lot of, you know, typical website design, right? So a lot of the basics, you know, I need to be able to fill out forms when I tab and the labels. I have to sort of be able to understand the page itself, the layout structure, or is each job given its own heading? Does a search function to work? And then when it's time to actually apply for the job, is everything that are all the buttons labeled appropriately? And not just labeled, but do they click, like, for instance, attach resume button, the forms, first name, last name, you know, all the stuff. Formatting instructions like birthdays. So it might say birthday mm/dd/YYYY, or you know the appropriate format as well. Those are just some tips on making career sites accessible.
Yeah, I would throw into that things that are date pickers. If you have exclusively a date picker and not a field to fill in with that MMDDYYY, did I get enough Y's in there? That date pickers can be problematic. We also, if you have like a training calendar or something on your website, that table format of a calendar can be problematic. So we've actually tried to move away from that and do text calendars. And then as Greg mentioned, document remediation, asking for signatures. So that's where some solutions like Adobe Signature and DocuSign can come in, although we're finding DocuSign to be a little bit problematic. Sorry if there's a DocuSign representative in the session today, but those solutions are not perfect. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we run across on the document side is the assumption that taking a Word document and converting it into a PDF automatically makes it accessible. and it doesn't. So documents, I think, are going to be kind of the next frontier. Once people get their websites down, documents will be the next part of that hiring equation to really make sure that everything is accessible.
Great, thank you. Jennifer asked the question, how do we test an existing website?
Greg, you want to talk about that? Because I know there are some built-in tools on some of the platforms.
Sure. So a lot of times if you're just sort of doing an initial test, you can use some automated scans, and those will give you a very baseline of accessibility. So typically they catch maybe 20 to 30% of the errors that you'll see. But then really the rubber meets the road when you start employing manual testing with people that use different environments in their everyday. So for instance, I use screen reading technology. So I would be testing for keyboard access and forms and how well can I get around, are things labeled. Others might test for things like color contrast. We'd want to make sure captions and transcripts are accurate for your videos. Those are just some things that we test for. Table layout, are things marked up as actual as they're supposed to be, or is information in a table actually marked up as a table or a list item. So those are just some things we test for. So yeah, there are definitely, it's manual testing is going to give you the most it's going to give you the sort of the best experience in terms of how well your site works. Automated extensions that are available can give you a baseline of accessibility.
And I would add to that, Greg mentioned some of the automated testing. Be wary of the silver bullet solutions. So those that are advertising for $49 a month, plug this into your website, you'll have full ADA compliance. A lot of those plugins and overlays can actually interfere with the screen readers like Greg demonstrated today. They can provide a false sense of security because they often don't catch everything. And what they are doing, keep in mind, they are crawling code. They are not looking at the user experience. They're not necessarily looking at content. They're not looking at, is that video closed captioning? They are truly crawling code, looking for code errors. So they are not the most reliable. And several of them have a pretty bad reputation in the disability community, especially in the blind community.
Great. There are a couple of comments from the audience with recommendations and a question about one of the tools that's currently being used by Dawn. They use Site Improve. Do you have an opinion on their accuracy? Site Improve.
We've looked at Site Improve, I think, haven't we, Greg?
Yeah, we've looked at them a little bit. We haven't, obviously we've been focused a lot on our own work, but a lot of what they do is sort of some remediation afterwards. I'd have to look at what they're doing from in terms of how they help to plan for accessibility as you're developing your website, as opposed to just what they find after you remediate.
Right. So kind of two things there, Don. One is that the best way to benchmark whether your automated solution is working is to have manual testing. Even if it's just a spot check of a few pages, having an actual person test with adaptive technology will give you a good view of how much you are getting or how much you're missing on accessibility. The other thing is looking at your content development processes, and this could be a whole extra webinar, and it's actually a topic we're going to be exploring through the AIM Institute's Heartland Developer Conference the first week in November. And that's how do we get accessibility baked in from the earliest stages of user experience design and content creation, so that we're not in this constant cycle of publishing content on a website, auditing it for accessibility to get a list of what's wrong, what's broken, doing remediation to fix it, but not fixing the root problem, which is how are those errors getting on the site to begin with.
Great. I think there's one last piece here, unless some others have come through, and Don thanks you for answering his question. Marlenia asks, what are some tips to make social media more accessible? I have dropped the URLs that the speakers have provided to us with regard to Facebook at Outlook Business Solutions, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. But maybe Natalie or Greg, could you address when people are planning and launching or updating their social media channels, how do we make those more accessible as well?
I think one of the big areas on that is the alt text on images, or making sure that your post describes the image. So there are some social posting tools that don't let you put in alt text for images. So you might have to look at the tools that you're using. Another big area is video, making sure that the video is closed captioned, making sure that that there's a transcript, and steering away when you're doing video content from one of the popular formats is people holding up signs with words on them and not saying the words out loud. That was like a really trendy video style, not accessible for people with vision impairment. Conversely, if you have a video that's just all images with a voiceover and there's nothing on the screen, it may not be accessible for someone with hearing impairment. So video is a big part of social media posts. That's actually also a topic we're developing an additional webinar on coming in Q1 of 2022. We will be delving into best practices for social media. Greg, do you have any other tips for social?
I do. So actually one initial tip, and I see this when I test a lot of clients' pages, is that their social media links have like these labels that just like don't make any sense at all. Like, you know, they might just have, you know, it just gets cut off, or but it doesn't say like, oh, I don't know, Olive Garden Facebook, Olive Garden Twitter, you know, like it'll say, it'll just have the name of the company. So it looks like a homepage, just the homepage, or it'll have something along the lines of, you know, it just doesn't have clear labels.
Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Absolutely. I think we've covered all of the questions. We've gotten a lot of comments. Thankful to Greg for sharing experience with us firsthand. It really makes a difference. I think, you know, it lends clarity to what works and what doesn't. And the comments about video that you just covered, very good information there as well. And Natalie, thank you for sharing the resources so that we can take action when we step away. There's a comment about trends using icons in social media. And I did think of that too, because emojis and icons and stuff, how does that impact your ability to, you know, comprehend and work with content in social channels?
So I think the screen reader will actually recognize emojis. Am I right there, Greg?
Yeah, it can. So I see that a lot on phone stuff, but yeah, so actually I have a news and the newsletter that we send out for folks in our subscription program. I actually have an article that talks about the difference between emoticons and emojis and how emojis work much better than emoticons.
The other thing I've seen lately with accessibility and emojis or emoticons is sighted people, we're not happy just putting one heart, right? We have to put 6 hearts. And so then for screen reader, it's reading every one of those hearts or every one of those exclamation points that you're putting at the end of your comment. So sighted people if we could just refrain, you know, just curb our enthusiasm a little bit and be happy with just maybe one emoji. It'd probably reduce some of the clutter for our friends who are using screen reader.
Very good point. Stancia, would you like to bring it home or right at the end of the session? So we'll let you wrap up.
Yeah,
Thank you.
with a few minutes to spare. Thank you. I'm glad we were able to get through all the questions, and thank you so much for this presentation. This has been very insightful and helpful. So Natalie and Greg, thanks for spending time with us today. So next up, we have a quick break before heading to our closing session, where our keynote speaker will be Soraya Shemali. And during this session, we'll bring the drawing. We'll be drawing the final early login contest winners, and one lucky individual who will receive a round trip domestic flight ticket courtesy of our official airline sponsor, Southwest Airlines. So good luck to everyone. But you must be present to win the flight, so make sure that you stick around for that final session. And please take the time in between the break to engage in discussion boards, keep the conversations going, and message with other attendees, or check out our sponsors and exhibitor profiles. All this can be done within your Whova web platform or mobile app. And that's all we have for you for this session. See you in the closing session, and have a great rest of your day.